Hola a todas, hola a
Oh,
todos. Pues hoy les tengo una sorpresa. Tengo ni más ni menos que al extraordinario Peter Sís aquí en entrevista, en vivo para ustedes. Bueno, en vivo para mí. Ustedes lo verán cualquier día, a cualquier hora. Y vamos a hablar de su nuevo libro, In Praise of Mystery, o en español se llama Elogio al Misterio, y que se publicó en ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Y por si fuera poca maravilla, Peter Sís, junto con Ada Limón, que es una gran poeta mexicoamericana, también tendremos esta maravilla volando por el espacio exterior, yendo eh, en la sonda Europa Clipper. Sí, Europa Clipper, rumbo a una de las lunas de Júpiter. Imagínense eso, este poema está grabado, Peter hizo las ilustraciones y vamos de eso y de muchas otras cosas a platicar. Hola Peter, ¿cómo estás? How are you?
hola, hola, Rodrigo, ¿cómo estás?
Ah, fine, thanks. And you? How is your Spanish?
Oh, I wish it was, I love it, but I can't speak it. I wish I could speak it. I love the sound of it.
Hola, is enough?
Hola, señor. Yeah.
So, I was telling the viewers that about your new book. It's am
Right.
it's amazing. The poetry is so sweet and emotional, and at the same time, it's like that, like an adventure or curiosity. This word mystery is
Yes.
everywhere in this book, in the text, in the images that you created, even in the hardcover. Permítanme enseñarles cómo es sin camisa.
Per favor, señor. Yeah.
So everything is full of this beautiful poetry that you
It's
made.
La Luna. Like here is La Luna on your book.
Oh, yes, yes,
It
yes.
was the inspiration from your Luna Ranchera.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I didn't know about it until now.
Well, and also, uh, the people don't know, but in my past book, I wrote about two kids in a train, and you was here it is, and in that time I asked you to illustrate it, but
Right.
you couldn't because you was working on a book about two kids
Trains.
in a train. This one,
Yes.
so this is the second time that we work in
You were connected
yeah, yeah.
cosmically.
Yes, of course. So, oh, I get impressed. But coming back to this,
Yeah.
uh, this is so beautiful. But how the obvious question is, how did it happen? How
Yeah. Yeah.
did the publishers ask you to make it,
Yeah.
or you knew already knew Ada Limon, or how it happened?
So, yeah, this is so nice when you give me credit, but this really was like a job, like a job when you are a professional illustrator and you get a job because I do my own books and then sometimes it takes me long time to make it work. And here I didn't know about this mission to Jupiter, but I got a phone call before Christmas from my publisher and from my agent. So Simon Boughton called me and said, there is this wonderful poem, which is traveling with NASA, with the spacecraft to the planet of Jupiter, to one of the moons of Jupiter called Europa. And this woman who's a poet laureate, poeta laureata, wrote the poem. She was commissioned by NASA to write a poem 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Hmm.
And he said, would you be interested to do it? But we don't have much time because the mission is going in October of 2024. So you only have uh, 2 months because then we have to prepare the book, print the book, And I said, it sounded very, very fantastic. So I said yes. But then I looked at everything at the poem. Poem was beautiful, but very fantastic, very whimsical. And it was all about like space. And I thought this is very difficult to do. And I didn't know Ada. And I started to make many, many, many drawings. And interesting thing is that when I met Ada, and it's only 2 weeks ago, I made it in person for the first time. She said when NASA called her, because NASA was preparing this incredible mission, and they wanted to make it more humane somehow to show it to children. So they went to Library of Congress, and Library of Congress is the one which appoints laureate, poet laureate for. So Ada is the poet laureate, and they asked her, and she said yes. But then when she was thinking about what she's supposed to say about people and the planets, and it's very positive. They wanted something very positive, how we going to the space and we are wonderful people from planet Earth. And so she said it was very difficult. And then she wrote like 19 drafts. And then she came up with the idea that it will not be about what's happening there, but about us. And the same thing happened to me, that I did many, many, many sketches. But Simon Botton, the editor, didn't show it to her until, and he helped me a lot because I got so much stuff that I didn't know which way to go. And most of all, I was worried about all these photographs now from all the satellites. You have pictures of the space which are so technically perfect that I couldn't compete with it. I couldn't compete with these photographs from space. So it became more like sort of naive version. Like I thought it has to be like the poem is very much like from the heart and very sort of sincere. And I thought my pictures must be handmade, must be like when people make something by hands and then they would want to tell aliens or something, okay, this is how we are. We can do things by hands. Yeah, this was the sweet moment when we feel alone and we want to meet somebody else, just in the human sense. And also was difficult for her. She has this beautiful poem, but it had to be cut into different pages. And then I was playing with the pages, and it's all was flowing. And I used to do animation, so I started to do. I can send you some pictures that I from the beginning when it's like a storyboard, like an animation. When one picture flows into another picture, and then it flows. It was like this long page of things which were sort of flowing, which was not good for the book. So it went through many different stages. Then I did it. And then I was thinking, as my son said, they will take the book and put it inside of the rocket and send it to Jupiter. And I felt, many years ago, 30 years ago, I did a book about Galileo. So it's also, he was observing Jupiter and the moons. That's why the moons have these names like Europa. And so I felt like I have a connection, but it was funny because NASA was working on this for 4 years. I mean, NASA was working on the project for 40 years. So there are some people who work on this spacecraft for 40 years because it will travel for 6 years, get to the Europa, which is one of the moons of Jupiter, and they have a science. There is water. There is water under the surface of Jupiter, of Europa. Sorry, there is water under the surface of Europa, and it's probably more water than we have in all the oceans on planet Earth. And now we want to find out if that water would be compatible with the Earth water. And it's not done with any business, like sort of, it's not done by some people who want to build resorts for tourism. This is done really by scientists who want to know, like, what does the planet look like? So it's all very good intentions. And when they got Ada, they thought, we will take her poem and engrave it on the one of the wings of the spacecraft.
Wow.
So if somebody from another planet or another I don't know, part of the cosmos will discover it. They will see how we are as people. And she says wonderful story that her grandmother made her always, I think it was her grandmother from Mexico, was always insisting she writes in beautiful handwriting, like that she has a beautiful handwriting. And she wrote it in with her own handwriting. It's written on the rocket. So that's interesting. So I did the illustration. It was printed. I met Ada for the first time um, last week or 2 weeks ago in New York Public Library, and then in National Gallery in Washington. And she's this wonderful sort of dynamo of the woman, very energetic and very sort of sparkling. And people love her. So lots of young people come to her and say, "Your poems inspired me." And she's not like I know number of poets, but lots of poets are sort of like more melancholic and to themselves. And if they become like laureates, they go home and write more poems about it. She's going out and she speaks. She now goes around all the national parks and speaks and talks to people about each park, how we have to protect the trees. She loves the trees, so I have a tree in the book, and that's what made it special for her because she loves books. And what was also amazing, yeah,
And
that's the book, but that she said when, yeah, so that in her poem it's about the books, but when she was commissioned to do this book, they wanted her to write this official poem about we the people, and she says, it's difficult to say we the people because it's a first words of Constitution of uh, United States of America, but she said, I am Latina, I am woman. I don't feel it's so hard sometimes to say we the people. And it's the same for me because I came from another country. I came from country of Czech Republic, and I live in America now. I'm in America, but it's so hard to say we the people because I sometimes think I have the accent. They don't think I'm one of them, you know. So it was interesting that this book was really done by Ada, me, and the editor is Simon Boughton, who came from England. So I thought this is nice because it's like speaking for all the people from all over the world because we all came from different parts. And if the spacecraft would be discovered on Europa by some other aliens, they would say, oh, the people on planet Earth, they all live together in harmony. They are all the same people. They don't have any divisions or something. It's also funny that they ask her to do poem, which would be on the level of fourth grade. And I think they meant that people at schools, you know, like little kids would get excited. And I know these official commissions are sometimes terrible because they tell you what you should be doing. And she said, oh, I thought they think the aliens maybe speak English or they communicate on the level of fourth grade or something. So that was very funny. She's wonderful. So the whole book now looks simple. It's not very big. It looks like, but it was a lot of just because it was happening in just 2 months or 3 months. And also the poem is so beautiful and pristine, and you don't want to overdo it. Or how do you? Poetry is difficult because poetry you almost see your own pictures in your head, and it's very hard to put it on page. And especially for young kids, I think I used to do lots of poetry with the poets like Jack Prelatsky, or and they used to be yeah, but it was not funny.
I
It
never.
was yeah, that's very good. That was the most, and it's also a moon or
Oh
something,
yeah,
a planet. You're right. You're
yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's so
I love this book too.
thank you. Yeah, so but that was like there was a story for children, which was sort of like a story with the beginning and the end, and little children would be laughing at it. Well, this is more like philosophical, I think, but I like it that it's so sort of beautiful that now, after COVID, after all these things happening in the world, I have a chance to do something which is like positive, like a message from everybody, and that it's not like just from one country or another, that it's like a universal message. I love that.
Yes, that's very true. This book is full of hope.
Hope,
Hope
yes.
in a very huge way, huge as
Yeah,
a moon, because that's what we need now. After all the things that we came through during the pandemic and the wars, and because in some aspect we said we learned nothing from all of it, and in
nothing else.
after the COVID, the war came up, many wars came up, and we said we are not learning. But this book works as a light or enlight these moments with this amazing project that I I'm very happy that you accepted it because I can't imagine anyone else doing these illustrations. Eh, because as I see a lot of parallels between Ada's poem and your illustrations, but no in the book, in the career. The way that the imaginations came alive in both in Ada's work and your own is really truly fantastic, and I see it very close the way that you imagine things, and it's her first picture book, right?
Right. That's her, because I also went to the library and got some of her other books, which are much more, it's about her life, about everything. She doesn't hold anything back. She grew up in California. She grew up with this very proud Latino family. She said, limon, it's a lemon, really. And
Yeah,
then
yeah,
also,
and
and
she's her parents was from Mexico, right?
right. And she
Wow.
says, we are the same because my name is Sís and I have a little accent over I. And she has a little accent over O in Limon. So we both have these accents. And when we met, we were talking how when I came to America and I started to work as an illustrator, my first job, I think my first job was in New York Times. And I was so lucky that they said, yes, you can do illustrations for New York Times. But then I look at my illustration and it says Peter Sís. And I said, what happened to my accent? And they said, this is America. We took away the accent because nobody, but they didn't ask me. And
Yeah,
so I was so happy when she said, I have this accent over Limon, and I always go to whatever, she said it in Spanish, to, post office or whatever. She said, you just,
yeah. The accent.
and we just spent only 2 days together, but we were very, like, it's spiritually, very close. Like I'm with you. I feel you sort of love your humor and attitude. So she's like that too. She's very, very human person. Doesn't have that sort of protective shell or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and we notice it in the poem too. She's very warm and very close. And how difficult was to work with someone else's idea, like this poem, in 2 months? How,
Yeah.
how did you
It, this
handle it?
was, this was a big, uh, that's how I started because I went to art schools in Prague and I would do my own projects, my own films. Then I came to America to work on my own film. It didn't work, and I was in existential moment when I had to find a job and just pay my rent and everything. And I became editorial illustrator for newspaper, magazines, and then for books. But nobody would want to give me chance to do my own stories. They said, these are crazy stories. This doesn't work in them. So I was doing illustrations for other people, like the Whipping Boy or black and white. Everything was done with the little black and white dots. And I came up with this idea to do black and white dots because nobody else was doing it. So I thought if I do something very special, I will be getting more work because I needed to get work every week to be able to eat and to pay the rent. So And then I became sort of, I learned to be just illustrator as a profession when they give you a job and you have to do it the best you can. And sometimes it doesn't work. So sometimes I would not understand what the story is about completely, but then they changed it. But I could, it was great for me to experiment with like the different techniques, what I did. I didn't sometimes agree with like especially it was difficult to work for business magazines because I didn't understand, stock exchange or whatever, but they just wanted some illustration of something flying or crawling or whatever. But I'm just saying all this that this was all good lessons to be illustrator as a profession, which I didn't know from my childhood. So it's the same with the books that somebody would send me the book and they would say, would you want to do this book? And they also were very careful that you wouldn't meet with the person who wrote the book because the publisher was in the middle and could sort of negotiate. So these were somehow relaxing moments for me because I found the solution and then I did the book, sometimes better, sometimes like Pablo Neruda, that started that started as a small book and then it was growing and growing. And that was funny because I misunderstood. I thought it's Munoz Ryan, and I thought his poems are by Pablo Neruda. Only in the end, I found out that she wrote the poems in the style of Pablo Neruda.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but so for me also, if I now work on my own books, they somehow became more um,
Oh, so
philosophical. So I spent too much time thinking about this is my story, and so it was a to do this in 2 months with this beautiful poem. I also had this editor Simon who was saying not this not he was really very strict, sort of leading me through it. So in the way it was fantastic because after COVID, everything became much more, as you said, COVID was strange that I don't think we quite processed it in our heads, what happened. And we pretend now everything's fine, the world is fine. But I think it's not fine that we need to really get out of this trauma. And it was a terrible experience.
mm,
And so I think that was I wasn't used to do something in 2 months, 3 months, but I did, and now I'm happy I did because it's got this positive message for all of us.
wow, but as the Europa Clipper, it's becoming a huge way a real trouble, but your own trouble since you were a kid. um, I'm going to show some books to all of us like this. This is the first
This
one.
is a difficult book, yes. This
Yeah,
is very
but
difficult,
but this is very personal, and
very
and
personal.
and in a way this is the beginning of many other things that happened to you. but
Yes, yes,
but in that beginning when you was a child, and you liked the books as every child, a lot of things happen, and this Europa Clipper is going to travel a lot, and have a huge journey, a memorable journey.
incredible journey, yes.
Yeah, but going back to your own story, when you arrived to the United States and was looking for a job, and many strange and funny things happened to you as a kind of good luck that at the end makes you the way that, and honestly to say, makes you the huge star, the huge legend in children's book illustrator that you are today. So, any story that you want to share with us about that difficult times that became funny, or now in time you see it as an amazing thing?
Yeah, what is the amazing I'm just trying to do book about it now, is how I even became a children book person, because I came to America, I came to Hollywood to make film. I had visa for 3 months, and I knew the names of the streets in Hollywood from Raymond Chandler stories, because I was reading these detective stories. I met some film stars, but I didn't know who they are. So that was all I knew about America, and I knew nothing about. I still don't know many things about America. It's funny because our kids who are American, they know it, but I still don't know how to order proper hamburger or something. But in Los Angeles, I was working on this film. The film got killed because I was working on behalf of Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union and East Europe decided to boycott the Olympic Games. And I got cable to immediately go back to Prague. And I didn't finish the film yet, so I said, I will finish it. Then the film didn't go well, and all of a sudden I was in Los Angeles. I was afraid to go back to East Europe because of the punishment that I didn't return. And I was trying to find another film, but I couldn't find another film. And I was trying to find some job, and it was very difficult because all I could do was draw pictures, didn't speak much English. And some woman who was a librarian in Santa Monica said, oh, I like your work, and maybe I could find you a teaching job, and maybe you could, her name was Josine, and maybe give me some samples of your work. And I was coming to this library once a week or something, and then when I came next time, the phone was ringing, and she said, you have a call from Maurice Sendak.
Mm.
And I knew the name, but I didn't know he's like a most famous American author. And I didn't know she sent him my pictures. So it was like in my name. And he thought I sent him pictures to show what my art is. And on the phone, he said, so you want to be in children's books? And I didn't even think I want to be in children's books, but I said, sure, because I had no money. And he said, so what are you doing in Los Angeles? It's the most terrible place. It's a place which is so pretentious. It's all these terrible films, and it's called Tinseltown, and you have to come to New York or Boston to be making books. And I said, but I don't know any other place in America. I just came to Los Angeles. So he said, you just have to come to the East Coast, and then I can maybe help you. And I thought, okay, so he's telling me if I go to East Coast, I will get a job to do children's books. So I bought an old car. I got money for the poster I did for the movie Amadeus, and I bought this old Mustang. I didn't even have a map because I thought New York is on the other side. If I drive this way, it must be on the other side. So I drove without, maybe then later I got some map, but I was going through Arizona, New Mexico. I got lost in Texas. I was going to San Antonio. I was like, this doesn't look right. New York should be up there. So I remember it was like this trooper when I rolled down the window. I said, which way to New York? And I had this accent, and he was like, do you even have papers or something? And then I had to find some paper I had that I'm temporarily in them. So in the end, I made it to New York when I thought this Maurice Sendak will say, oh, so here you will get a book to do, and you can stay or what. And he just said, I can give you introduction, but you have to take care of yourself. So for me, like the idea that I got this introduction from Maurice Sendak, which helped me a lot, because then people would meet with me, and I got my first book with these little black and white dots. But the second book was already Whipping Boy, which was Newbery book, and slowly I was getting more and more work for newspapers and magazines. So that was very, very lucky. And the same thing was that I did a book on Columbus, which was my hero when I was little. I had this book with all the ships. So I didn't think that Columbus was terrible because he came to the New World and started the whole. For me, he was like the sailor. So I did the book called Follow the Dream, and then I got a phone call from Mrs. Onassis, and I thought like, wow, I heard this name before. and but it cannot be the same person. So she said, "Can you come to Doubleday, whatever?" So I come to Doubleday and sitting in the lobby, and then she's coming, and I see it is Mrs. Onassis, who I know from seen her in the movie reels or television or something, but I didn't know how to tell her that, like say, "Hello, nice to meet you. Are you Mrs. Onassis, who was the?" So I didn't know how to say that, so I was like pretending like I said, "Hello, very nice to meet you." She said, "Do you want coffee?" and everything. And then we look at my book with I had some map, and she said, "Oh, Greece, I used to live in Greece." So I was like, "Oh, really? You live in Greece?" And then, so we were talking like that, and I think she thought I didn't know who she was. But and we did a beautiful book about Prague together, Three Golden Keys, and it was a beautiful book, and she was a wonderful editor. Only problem was that once the book was done, she unfortunately became ill and died after that. But so these were like the experiences which, when I was coming from Prague, how would I ever imagine I can meet with Maurice Sendak or Mrs. Onassis or things like that, which were sort of like helping me along the way. But it was almost like just little messages from some well-meaning, you know, fairy who was trying to make me succeed or something. But there were also bad stories. So these were good stories in my publishing life. Oh, some message here, right? We
Oh,
could,
yes.
oh, you upgraded the meeting.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Thank you.
no, no, it's on. I was continuing the
Yeah,
time.
thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Sorry. Eh, what what an amazing story. This beginning and on all the characters that appear in your way to make it possible.
Also, it was now it's very hard to explain even to my kids, but when I came to America, first 10 years, I had to think I will never be able to go back home because it was in that whole land behind the Iron Curtain. And if I would go back, I was sentenced to 2 years for leaving the country because nobody could leave the country, was sort of without permission. So it was amazing change after 1989 when the wall came down and that whole territory became free, and all of a sudden I could go back to Prague and my books were published there. But at that time I already had American wife and 2 kids, so it was very hard to say. So I was trying to live like both places, but it's very difficult because the uh, Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic is a very small country. It's a completely different language. And they would always ask me about politics, like what is President Obama doing? That's like, I don't know. I'm a children book illustrator. I can't explain it. I can explain you what I like, but I can't explain you what the politicians are doing.
Wow. Well, yeah, it's a long trip and 1999 you never imagined that you
Never.
you be able to come back home. And now
Yeah.
and now your relation with your hometown is different than in that time. So, but
Yes.
New York made you or shaped you in a different way that
Yeah,
you
that was good and bad in the way that really New York, they say it's a city which never sleeps. And I think in the beginning when I was trying to get some work. It was good because it was never sleeping. It was always going in this, you could never hear quiet. It was always buzzing, buzzing, buzzing. Everything was shaking. And I think it was great because I was always working and I couldn't sleep. But I think you can only do it for some part of your life because if you spend
yes,
the whole life, it's
but
just, so now I'm outside, like I'm 40 minutes on Hudson River outside of New York. So um, I can relax, it's quiet at night, but the city is like, that was fantastic. And also, I had to go in that time and get this story in person. I had to draw these sketches, bring them to the editor. They would say, "Okay, we want this sketch or this." There was no, then came fax machine. It was fantastic fax machine. All of a sudden, you could fax it. And now, of course, everybody works from home and sends the pictures on digitally, but I still do it by hand and bring it by in person. So for me, the biggest satisfaction is if you bring the finished book, and they have these big tables in conference rooms, and you can put all the art on that big table. And then the editor comes and other people come and they go around and they look at the art. And well, I like it when they say, "Oh, we like it very much," and then I go like, "Oh, it feels
Yeah,
so good." It
you re-
doesn't mean anything, but it's great.
you remember me a story about Alicia and I was in Japan many years ago, and Motoko Matsuda, the Japanese editor,
Yes,
and she's Satoshi Kitamura, uh, another legend of illustration of children's books, invited us to a manga publishing house, a
right.
huge building, and they till now work by hand and have agents all over Japan working with the illustrators, and they
Mhm.
go to the originals and go back to Tokyo, scan the work manually. Everything is manual.
It's
Hand
amazing. Yes.
prints too. So I remember that time when in Japan that they already, yeah, a very technological country. You can't imagine this group of agents traveling Japan, picking up all the art. It's amazing, sorry, and so as yours that you like to see it and to have the human contact.
Oh, human contact is the most important thing. I
Of
think it's the
course,
most
of
important.
course, of
But
course.
also they were funny because as a student, I remember in Prague that I left some finished art on the train. It just because I was always absent-minded. That was terrible. Never found it. And then I remember getting one article in New York Times. They said we have a very important article. There was something about Yasser Arafat, whatever, and I had to go pick it up. And they gave me the article to take it home and make sketches. And I had to take subway for like 3 stops. And I was so excited that I'm doing this important article that I took out the article from my portfolio in the subway to read it. And at that moment, the train was coming and the article flew into the tracks. Also, they said this is very important article and nobody should ever see it or something because we don't know what will happen. And all of a sudden, my article was flew through the subway, and the only thing was to go back and said, "I'm sorry, I had this accident." I couldn't believe it that I would say the article flew away. I don't remember what was the reaction, but it's funny because today people maybe would have email malfunction or something.
Yeah, yeah, but
I hate it now that you can hear from anybody at any time, at any moment from uh, Brazil now or from Japan, and you find it in the morning. You don't see them. You don't ever see them. Like I had this exhibition in Japan, and they are very strict about saying it's beautiful or thank you. So I was always like, did anybody like it? Did anybody come to the exhibition? And they always said, yes, it's very nice. I said, tell me more.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I have the same shock that you said. Yes, yes, I
It's just a
understand.
different way of how they say things. And I was like, did anybody like it? Did anybody say anything nice about
Yeah,
it?
yeah. Of course, of course. That's all. Give me more. Give me more. Yeah. Well, I was just there. I was looking many of your books that I have, and I noticed that talking about trains, talking about moons.
Moons. Oh yes, Mensajero de Estrelas. Yes, that was
Oh,
when our son was born. So I remember that because this was I did book that was the problem with I did book about Charles Darwin, and there was like scientific research, and then I did a book with Jack Prelatsky called Animelos, and all of a sudden it was a problem because it's about fantastic creatures. So it's like, how can you tell children about what is scientific? And that's why I love this book because it is about heart, it's about soul, so I don't have to be precise like what did Darwin discover in Argentina or something. So yeah, there was sometimes the problem with the how much also the books changed since I started in my book was first book was in 1982 or 3. It's called The Bean Boy, and it still says Peter Sís lives in Santa Monica, California, or something. So since then, there are lots of like different some, and also it's true that some books age better than the others. I did a book which is very personal about the explorer um, from Czech Republic whose name was Eskimo Welzel because he lived with Eskimos. But then the problem was like you shouldn't really use the word Eskimo now. So the book is it's published again in Czech where they do not have such a. But I understand that there are these rules which we all have to obey so we would be better people. But it's something when I did it in 19, I don't know, 92, I didn't expect that this would be a problem 20 years later or something. It's interesting because it's for the good thing. So I agree with it, but like it's unexpected difficulties. Yeah.
Yeah, but if someone can tell us about difficulties, is you. So, but the way that you solve it with art and these amazing books is the best way that you could made it ever. From your work in movies and your early love of making mm, mm, moving pictures to these books, there's a lot of things to talk. The the first book that I bought of you was The Wall, but the one that I felt in love was these two that you
Oh, yes,
know
yes,
probably.
yes.
These books and all the imagination and we come back to the migration theme as with Ada Limón. Uh, these topics are always in part of your DNA as a curious kid looking for these differences in the world. Like I love Madlenka very much
Thank
because
you.
uh,
Thank you.
yes, as she sees all these people different, but as a huge richness of her own world, private world. So I think is amazing and how all these books that I don't have all your books, but I have some of them.
Yeah, that's the one with Mrs. Onassis.
Yeah, and how it's connected, even if you don't know it, in time you realize that all the books are connected in a very solid career as an illustrator. And a year ago, we was talking in New York City. I went to New York City to present Luna Ranchera, and you told me the story about um, the the Amadeus poster,
Yes.
and I get amazed because I love that poster very much. I always feel that this is so impressive, the art and the shape and all the style. But I never knew that you did it. So for me, it was like, what? You did it?
But it was a scary poster for me just because it connected directly Prague and America for me. And I was in Prague when they came to make a movie, and it was very um, difficult because Milos Forman was a famous film director, but also was considered to be refugee or immigrant. So when he came to make a movie Amadeus, they let him do it because he said, I will give you so much money for shooting the film in Prague. That so it for me it was a hope that one day if I can have enough money, they will let me come back again. But I was in Prague when he came to choose the locations for the film. And then I was in Los Angeles when he was editing the film in San Francisco. And they called me and said if I would make the poster. And the poster, because they insisted to have this figure from Amadeus with Don Giovanni, I don't know, it's like this contour or the black figure with the hands
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the red sky. So it's very sort of like scary. And I always felt like this is the first project I did in America. And it's almost like somebody saying, welcome to America, but it's like a little scary. But that was the poster which made it possible for me to buy an old car and go to New York when Maurice Sendak told me to go. And that's how I got into the books. And sometimes now I think maybe I was too naive because the first positive phone call I had was this Maurice Sendak who said, you come to do books. Maybe if I stayed 3 more years in Los Angeles and made my animation, I could have been, but that's how it is in life. Sometimes you make certain decisions and it's no way to look back but it was not, now when I understand more about everything, Maurice Sendak just, like if somebody writes me, like some young student writes me and says, I want to do pictures, I want to do stories, I want to do books. I'm not going to say, oh my God, it's so difficult. If you can go and work in the computer industry, it's much better because you will have so much pain. So I go like, no, I like your art very much. And if you will work hard, you can, and so I think Maurice Sendak, when he got my pictures, probably wanted just to be sort of supportive, but didn't completely change my life this way. And I have one letter from young man who wrote me after art school, like 20 years ago. And he has a book. And he wrote me like that he would like to make books, but if I think it's easy or difficult and all that. And he did his first book, just illustrations for the book called I don't want to say his name, but anybody can find it. It's called The Dragons Love Tacos. Book is on bestseller list for like 20 years. It's like number 2, number 3, sometimes. So he sent me a letter, and he's a very nice guy and very nice artist. But when you come from art school, you are worried, like, what will happen to me? Am I going to be able to make a living? And he wrote this letter, and since then he has this one book, which is always on the bestseller list because I think every grandmother has to go and buy it. And so now he's got the freedom to do his art and other books, and he doesn't have to worry if books sell or don't, because we all of us in books, it's sort of egoistic in the way as an artist you want to be satisfied and you want people to say this is really nice, but you're also doing something which is part of the market. I think it's got so many good things, but also bad because you're creating this whole, you're telling your story, it's in the book, it's beautiful, but there's always that element that somebody would say, oh, it's out of print, or I couldn't find your book anywhere. It's always like some people who come and say, I went to St. Louis and I couldn't find your book anywhere. So you go like, well, what can I do?
Yes.
Yeah,
I always said, as an author, as an artist, in your case, you always want your book be loved by the readers. But as a reader, you are in the absolute right of don't like this book or any other book.
you're absolutely right.
So it's difficult to be between because you are a book creator, but also you are a reader. And you have two positions in that. And I always try to think as a reader when I have a new book. Okay, uh, I love it, but maybe not everybody loves this story. And and that's all. You make your best effort to make it happen, but you made only a part of the book. The other part of the book is made by the reader and what this book means
Absolutely.
to them.
That's what is fantastic about it, but also can be painful because I was thinking about it lately, how that some friends who knew my art before and the film, and they said, "So how did you get into books?" And I said, this is such a fantastic artistic discipline, really, because you are not just creating the pictures or the story, you're creating this whole thing, the whole world around the story, but then also you're creating, as you said, somebody reads it and creates their own story. And so it's like this multi-dimensional thing, much more than in the movies where you have 2 hours or half an hour, you go and you get this story. This sometimes the children say we go back to that book. Our son reads it every week. There was like one book I had for little kids called Fire Truck, and some mother said like he reads it all the time for like months and months. This is terrible. What shall we do? Or like the story of Madlenka, which was really personal story that we moved downtown Manhattan, and I was from the country when everybody is the same. Everybody, it's very, especially under the communism, like everybody looked the same. They were like not people from any other cultures or any other colors or any other. It was like on monotone sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, I'm in downtown Manhattan, and just on one block, you have people from 15 countries. She's a little girl who goes and they give her little lollipop, or in the Chinese restaurant, and she's meeting all these cultures. She has no problem with any. It was so for me. It was such a amazing feeling of this international, and also it was very. It was now it's very expensive area, very hip, but in that time it was very sort of human dimension. So I did this book about this little girl who's like friendly with everybody from all over the world, and she doesn't know anything about how the world is, but she knows people from different countries, which
And
was funny because then somebody who was a crit, I remember now somebody who wrote in the New York Times about it and said, "How come you have France, England, no, France, Germany, whatever, 4 European countries, but you only have one picture for South America?" And I said, "But I only had like, I don't know, 24 pages or 32 pages." But it was right. I mean, but I didn't I didn't make a plan. This was just like following my feelings. So it wasn't a rational plan. And it was a book which was made of love for her, and because she was very precocious little girl. Funny thing was that her name is Madeleine, and I call it Madlenka. And then people would stop her in the street and say, "So how are you, Madeleine?" And she hated it. She was like it's hard to make books about your own children just because then they said, "Well, this was my story. How come you made my story into the book?"
and Madlenka is very generous because she loves the bread. She loves every particularity of each of the neighbor guys in around her. So it's very sweet. And yes, I only can think how the kids fall in love of books, and it's because you truly do it as the way that you wanted to do and to tell the story that you wanted to do.
And that was like 10 years, I would say, maybe even more. That was good and bad because for 10, maybe 15 years, I could just do books about their stories of both. Well, one is a girl, one is a boy. And I would just like follow. I was sort of learning about America through them. So he would take me to baseball games, or he would, with the fire trucks. One morning we woke up and we had signs everywhere. We want, that was funny because she wrote, "We want dogs." We want one dog. But it was like an organization of people who are telling you that, yes, we want dog. We are like, so she was putting pressure that she want to have a little puppy. So they became Madlenka's dog. I think then in the end, it was difficult for me when they became sort of, yeah, that was the dog. When they became teenagers, it was difficult. But then I went into this big project about the Conference of the Birds.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was for me, there was a strange book just because it took me a long time, but it was something I wanted to. I had this book from Borges, and he describes all these creatures in the book of the magical creatures. And there was a story of Simorg, and I loved it so much. And so I made a print, and I would go to every publisher I knew. I was trying to like sneak it in, and I thought somebody will discover it with me, but nobody wanted to. Everybody thought it's too strange. And it's an old poem from 12th century in Persia. So it's got some Sufi implications, but I simplified it just to the story of the birds. And then I painted it and painted it. And when I did it, I look around and the children were grown up already. And that was difficult because I all of a sudden missed when they were little, and I was quickly trying to think, what can I do now that it would be for little kids if I don't have little kids? And I did some book called Ice Cream Summer or something. But that was strange because it wasn't really, it was done more like remembering how it is to be a kid. It wasn't, I already didn't have those little kids to watch them how they do it. So that was interesting. And with the birds, it was also interesting because it was published as the book for adults. So it's also very strange when the publishers in I think in America maybe only they say this book is for children and this book is for adults. And once they say it's for adults, people say, oh, this is his first book for adults. But for me, it's the same as my other books. And that book was like they said, it's a beautiful whatever, but it didn't, I think it wasn't selling for them. So it was like nobody paid that much attention. But that book through the years, like now they making theater production for La Mama. Like that book has got lots of fans through the years. That's another power of the book, that it's not always about when the book comes out and everybody says, oh, this is a book which goes on. Some books have this long life when they just can talk to certain people of, and it's very interesting. I know like if people come and they say, autistic children love your book. And I don't know why, but I like that connection that it has got some uh, portal almost with some group of kids. Maybe like I was when I was little, because I was a very quiet kid who was like sort of, and I loved the books. It was really almost like you walking inside of the book. And the book was the safe place for me because you would go to bed. And then I remember the decisions when you, but there was more like chapter books when I would read at night under the bed with some light. And I knew it's getting late, that I will be tired in the morning, but it was so exciting that I had to finish it. Books are magic for me. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was looking for all the books. I had the hobby that you made the cover illustration. I couldn't find it, but that book remembers me this, the kids reading at night, trying to end the story. It's an amazing journey, and as we see now, you didn't create a whole world. You created a solar system with all the crazy.
She did, but it's so wonderful to be with her because she loves to speak to people. She speaks so well, and she doesn't. What I notice, somebody asked her, "How do you get inspiration?" And Ada, like I was used to when I became like successful in America, they would send me on these book tours, but I was almost like I thought I'm expected to say all the positive stuff. Like, so people would ask me, how do you get the inspiration? I would say, oh, I look at a tree and every day I go and draw. And then I thought, but children must think I'm crazy because like some days maybe are not so good. Some days you don't draw. Some days you are sad. Some days you don't feel. And I was like so positive because I thought this is how you do it in America. And then it was interesting when we were at this event in the New York Public Library that they asked Ada and said, so how do you get inspiration for your beautiful poems? And she said, you know, some days I do have inspiration, but some days I don't have an inspiration. And it was so fantastic that you say that you admit that you're only a human being. And then some people can only have maybe one good idea alive. There was another thing that I was like expected. Well, I was also paying the bills, but like to do one book after another, I was so happy that I can do books in 3 countries. And I did sometimes one book by Prelutsky, one, 2, 3 books a year. And now I go like, I can't do it anymore. But I think now I believe if you can do something really special and takes you 7 years, I know somebody would have to give you money to do that, but I think it's better to do it thoughtfully than to just like trying to get it out. So,
Wow. Well, yeah, that's amazing, and I want to close this conversation because we could be talking all day long,
it would
but
be a beautiful day. You should do that all day long.
yeah, yeah. One day, a year ago, we promised that we see in a different country every time we could. So we will. One day, I hope one day.
I will show you around Prague. Yeah, we will meet in Prague, and I will take you around. Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
Perfect. For me, it's
Okay.
perfect. So I want to thank you, your this amazing conversation and this all these stories that you share with me today. But I want to thank you all your friendship since many years, all the time that we keep together. Uh, and I want to thank the books because the books join us.
Yes, they do. And also my memories of I was in Mexico City 2 times. It was always so wonderful, especially being with people who uh, deal with books and art. It's almost another level just because it's missing that commercial aspect or something. So, and you always so gentle and optimistic and wonderful that I really appreciate it because you realize from all the friends around the world, especially with everything, as you said, we went through COVID and all that, you're looking for, like with Ada Limon, like for the sparkles of sun, of light, and you are one of these sparkles. And I thank you and Alicia for your friendship and hope to see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And well, let's keep working. Let's keep telling.
Let's see if the next book is also we do something
Yeah,
similar
of
after the trains and after the
yeah,
moons.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. But
Let's
you had that beautiful golden badge. That I wish I would have that. So it was pretty
yeah.
good.
Well,
Okay.
thank you very much for this.
Okay. Obrigado. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the book. Thank you for the stories. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you, Rodrigo. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.